Mrs. Booth, would you
What I want?
would you give us a little introduction of yourself, and so that we can identify who you are and what your relationship to Terry is for the purposes of this book?
Okay, now what would you like to know about
I'd
me?
like to know your name.
I was born.
Well, I hope so.
Well, let's
Give us
see.
your full name and what your teaching credentials are for Terry.
Okay, my full name is Loretta Kathleen Marguerite Corbett Booth. That's that enough?
Time out. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a
Yeah,
reminder.
I'm used
That's
to
okay.
doing that.
That's okay. I just thought I'd initiate
Okay,
it
but
right
I mean,
now
I'm
and then-
being silly now about the name, you know.
Well, that's all
That
right.
is my
We love
name.
that.
We want
love
that.
We
You
love
do?
that.
This is not a life and death situation. This is
It
a
isn't.
little lighthearted.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So without beating on the table, give us your name again,
Should I hold his hand so I don't beat it?
if you want to.
Okay. I'm kidding.
That's all right.
Let me start now?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Your name.
I'm not gonna give all that. My name is Loretta Kathleen Corbett Booth, and I went to St. Pius Grade School to the Good Sisters of Loretto, and I'm named after Our Lady of Loretto. My dad and mom, they couldn't, for some reason or another, my mom couldn't get pregnant, and I said she ended up with me, and it was such a shock, I guess, to her. She had a slight stroke. I'm enough to give anybody a stroke, right?
I don't think so.
Well, I'll make them laugh too.
Yeah. And anyhow, she wanted me to wear blue and white. Promised Our Lady that I'd wear blue and white till I was 6. And then when I went to school, I went to St. Pius to the Sisters of Loretto, and I wasn't such an angel. And anyhow, by the time I hit about the 6th grade or 7th grade, one of the nuns got me aside and told me that if I would study, that there was a scholarship to Loretto Academy, and if I would study instead of all this foolishness, maybe I could win it. Oh, I could win something, you know? So I buckled down and studied, and still had some fun, you know, like hitting the guys in the head with a book and stuff like that. But anyhow, I won the scholarship, and there were two girls who were tying, 3 of them, in fact, tying for the scholarship. And here comes this black sheep along, and I got it. So I went to Loretto, and my dad was going to send me to Roosevelt. Not Roosevelt, Roosevelt. And his mother was a very Irish, you know, Catholic and everything. And the family in that part all came from Ireland. And she said, no, she'd not go to school with those kids. She had gone to the Sacred Heart Academy here in St. Louis because her father came from Ireland, and he made out real well as a superintendent of Murphy's Wagon Works down around 18th Street. Mm-hmm. And so he sent my grandma to the, you know what all this.
Come.
Oh yeah, to the Sacred Heart Academy, and then her brother went to what was then Christian Brothers College, CBC, and that's when it was college. It wasn't a high school then, and he graduated from there. He ended up a judge up in Calhoun County, and so anywho, my dad met my French mother, and they were all from France, and finally, I mean, she teased him a lot. You know, like he'd say, will you marry me? Why should I marry you? You know, this big Irishman, you know. But anyhow, it ended up that they got married, and they had one child, and it was a stillborn, and of course that broke them up. And so then they started this novena up at the Rock Church, and they made the novena for 10 years, and then they got me. And then after I went to Loretto Academy, I had the good Loretto nuns, and they were good teachers. It was you, No, it was that other guy. Where'd he go?
He's outside.
Well, he was the one that said he was scared of me and everything. He should have gone to the Sisters of Loretto. He'd know what scared is. They didn't monkey around at all. And I owe them a very big thank you. And anyhow, then from there, I got on to another scholarship to Webster College. And Dad wanted me to go to Washington U, and he didn't want me to go to Webster, but it saved him money, so that was fine with that Irishman, save a little money. Anyhow, I went there, and I graduated from there, and then after that, I got a job with McDonnell Aircraft.
You graduated from Webster when? What year?
I never tell that. You'll
never
guess
tell that?
how old I am.
Oh, okay.
1940.
1940?
Wow.
Yeah.
1940, okay.
And what do you mean, wow? That I graduated?
Oh, go ahead.
And I was in the drum and bugle corps and all that silly stuff. And I played softball, and, much to my mother's disgust. And anyhow, then I dated this guy who went to, he went to McBride, then to Cleveland. He was a guy that, he did like school too well. And we didn't get married because he went into the service. He went World War II, and so that was the end of that until he came back. And then when he came back, he was I think a captain then in the Air Force. And my father didn't approve of him too much. He was one of these, he figured, until he found out that his mother's maiden name was McNamara. So that sounds like a pretty good name, And anyhow, I dated him, and then he asked me to marry him. And by that time, I dated most of the guys that were left here. And they were all 4Fs, and they didn't appeal to me. And so when he came back in that uniform and everything, hey, this is serious. Don't you know that?
What was his
He's
name?
laughing at me. What?
was his name?
Jim Booth.
Jim Booth.
And his mother's maiden name was McNamara, so I wanted him to change his name from Booth to McNamara. And he wouldn't do it.
Well, I don't blame him.
Well, I wasn't going to marry him if he wasn't going to change it. And anyhow, we ended up getting married. And the funniest thing about our wedding, all the nice guys were gone. They were overseas, coming back. The war had ended, but they were still coming back. And all his friends were still over there. He couldn't find a groomsman. So a friend of his mother's owned a bakery shop, and he told Jim, he said, Jim, I'll get a groomsman for you because this guy's in on leave from the Navy. He was a Navy captain. And he's in the photograph, and none of us can remember who he is.
That's funny.
And and then I had 4 bridesmaids and 1 man to go with them. So, but yeah, we went there. And somebody told me it was a colonial wedding. That's the way the colonials had weddings like that. So I was different, colonial wedding,
Wow.
all that. And then after we got, I'm supposed to talk about him.
We're getting there,
Oh, okay.
because that's my next question.
Huh?
What made you get into teaching?
Well, I had no use for teachers. I thought they could do anything else. That's why they were out teaching. But then after we were married, we had, I think it was 1 daughter then, and then that one came along. And the nuns asked me if I'd help them out teaching at Webster. And I said, well, I can't, And, well, could you just help us out for a short time? So I asked my mother, and she said, yeah, bring the kids here. So I taught over at, I taught at Narix a little bit, then I taught at Webster once in a while. And anyhow, that went on. And then I thought, I'm getting tired of this stuff. They told me they wouldn't, call me very often, but they kept calling me. It might be because I didn't charge. I don't know,
Probably.
Good sisters. But anyhow, I went downtown then one time when Jimmy was on whatever those things are that they go on. you know, they fly around and see what's going on in the States. Anyhow, I went over at downtown to the Board of Education and told them I would like to sign up as a substitute. I thought, like, the weeks he was gone, I could substitute. He wouldn't know the difference, you know. And then the following week, I'd stay home. Didn't work out that way. I went down and I signed up, and the guy who interviewed me, he was delighted to talk to me and everything with all the math I had. At that time, I didn't have my master's yet. And anyhow, he talked to me, and then they had a meeting. All these men were in a circle, and there, little old me sitting there, you know. I'd never been in a public school in my life, and I didn't know anything about it, but of course, you know, I was learning. And he said, "Oh, what makes you think you could teach boys? You've gone to all these girls' schools. How could you teach boys?" And I said, "Well, I don't see any difference in boys and girls." I said, "I'll get along fine with the boys." I got the job. But anyhow, after that, why, before that, I had worked for General American Life Insurance Company, and I left that and went to McDonnell Aircraft. This was before I did any teaching. And I went to McDonnell Aircraft, and it was a rainy day. My mother made me get all dressed up in white and all, and this guy hired me. He hired me as a stenographer. I didn't know how to type. I didn't know anything about charting. You know, if you know math, they think you know everything, which you don't. And so I went to night school at Rubicon, I think, and I took up shorthand typing and practiced it over, you know, and I got the job. And then they put me into the programming department, and I went into that, and this one who hired me was my boss, and his name was Bruce Camel. Well, I mean, there were things going on out there at McDonald. I didn't know anything about it because I was too naive or something. And we'll skip all that stuff in there. You understand that. But anyhow.
When you first started substitute teaching, were you going to Scruggs on a regular basis, or how did that happen?
Well, I signed up to substitute, and they told me I'd be lucky, you know, to get maybe one day once in a while. That was Friday. Monday, they called me to substitute. I thought, I got scared because Jimmy would be home Monday. What was I going to tell him if I walked out? Well, I got through that okay. And they sent me over to Scruggs. And I thought I was supposed to substitute the way you teach school. You know, I didn't know that you're a goof off. You go to substitute, you sit there and you look at the kids and say, "Now, hi, how are you? Shall we play this and shall we do that? We'll play with numbers." I didn't know that. So I made up my mind I was going to really,
You're going to be a teacher.
right, and that's the way I was teaching him.
What year was that?
And this guy came along.
Was he your first year of substitute teaching, or had you had some experience?
I can't remember.
It was 1961.
That's the year I started.
1961 is when
Yeah.
I had you as a substitute
Right.
teacher at Scruggs.
Now I understand that when you were trying your best
Yeah,
to actually teach this class
Yeah.
something,
yeah.
you had some difficulty with one of your star pupils. Could you tell us about that?
This one,
Yes.
I'll tell you more. I
Dr.
would-
Terry Yochum. Could you tell us about your experience with Terry Yochum?
Well, see that grin on his face?
Yes.
I got that from him all the time. And I thought, what am I going to do with this kid? And I threatened him. I told him, if you don't straighten up and fly right, Buster, you're going to be out of here. I didn't know how much power I had. But anyhow.
What was he
kinda-
doing?
Oh, talking to me what I was supposed to be teaching and stuff like that. And talking to the guy next to him and talking baseball and all that junk. And
Talking to John White, sat right next to me, yeah.
yeah, you went.
I did not go to Scruggs.
But Johnny did, and
I did.
you reprimanded me because I
Oh,
was
that guy
talking-
upstairs.
The guy
Yeah.
upstairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when Terry wouldn't listen to you and behave, what did you do with him?
Kicked him out of the class, told him to go out and sit on a bench.
And what happened?
I think it was the principal came along and picked him up and took him down to the office, and they kicked him out of school.
And the principal's name was George Hargett.
Hargett, I don't remember him.
Yep. And you had substitute taught that week.
Yeah.
And I was put on timeout on the bench the first day,
Yeah.
the very first day.
Well, I thought that's what you were supposed to do.
So
And-
your first official act as a substitute teacher at Scruggs School was to
Get him out
throw
of
Terry
class.
out of class.
Right.
And,
Well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
and Mrs. Booth, what you didn't know
Uh-oh.
was that I had been on timeout on that bench far too many times.
No, I didn't know that.
And Mr. Hargett told me that if he ever saw me on that bench on timeout one
Yeah.
more time, I was in 8th grade,
Yeah.
that I was going to be kicked out of school.
Yeah. No, I
So,
didn't know that. I
of
felt
course-
badly when I heard
Of course
about
you
it.
couldn't know about it.
No.
So here I'm out in the hallway. I'm trying to hide because I know Hargett is going to be paroling the hallway. And I'm trying to hide because you said I had to be out there half a day, not the whole day.
Oh.
So I'm hoping that the half a day he won't be walking that hallway and I can get back in class.
How long were you successfully out there before he appeared on the scene?
Less than an hour.
Uh-oh.
Less than 1 hour. And
What was his reaction to seeing your smiling face on the bench?
Yeah, he was always smiling, yeah. You know, I haven't done anything really, have I? Why would you want to do this to me? That was his attitude.
Of course.
And Hargett
Of
comes up
course.
and he walked up to me, Fred, and he just goes, I can't believe it. You're done, is what he said. So I, with this little silver lip that I've had, tried to talk my way out of this. It's not working. It is not working. So Mr. Hargett took me down to the office and writes this slip letter to my parents. And he told me that you are kicked out of school for 2 days. And you need to take this to your parents. And one of your parents must come back to school here for you to be reinstated, or you will not be reinstated.
Now, when you took this note home, which parent did you encounter first?
Well, I was kicked out of school in the morning, and of course my dad, Dr. Kenneth Yochum, the chiropractor, was treating patients. He was at his practice. And of course my mother was home, Cecilia. And to complicate the matter worse, Mrs. Booth, my mother was the president of the PTA. And
This could potentially create some embarrassment for her.
this is a big problem for my mother, and she's also with Mrs. Millie Clay, Paul Clay's mother. They are the two room mothers for Mrs. Updike's class. You were substituting for the 8th grade class, Mrs. Ruth Updike. And I never, ever really liked her at all. And John
Why?
White, she just was very stern, and she didn't have any fun, and
Oh,
she
you
was
mean
no
I wasn't
fun.
stern?
Well, you were, yeah, but you were kind. She was never really kind. I don't know what the deal was on her, but
Back to your mother and the note.
my mother in the note, it's a disaster. She's the room mother with Paul Clay's mom, Millie Clay, Mildred Clay, and she's now the president of PTA. And Millie Clay and her are the room mothers for the drum and bugle team. And I'm in the drum and bugle corps for Scruggs, the head bugler, and Kay, my sister, is twirling the baton, and Paul Clay's blowing the bugle, and this is a major disaster. On top of it, Millie Clay and my mom are also the den mothers for the Cub Scouts, and I'm in the Cub Scouts, and now I'm
Oh,
out.
gosh.
Now I'm out. This is a disaster. I mean, my mother is embarrassed beyond belief. And go in your room. Stay in your room. I'm 14 years old, you know. Go in the room. So I go in the room. Now, Fred Weissman is interviewing me here. Fred and I have been friends for a long time. Fred, you were the best man at my wedding. And you know my father's temper.
What time did your father get home?
You see, it was far too fast for me, trust me. This was like late morning, just before lunch I got kicked out, okay? Well, my dad would go downtown, have lunch at Maryland Cafeteria with Bill Bastunis, then he would practice in the afternoon. He comes home at like 4:30. to eat dinner and then go back to see patients at night. So he comes home at 4:30. I'm in the room. I'm on timeout in the room from 11 o'clock till 4:30. No food, nothing.
So mom gets to talk to dad before dad sees you.
That's right. My father, Doc Yochum, gets this blast from my mom, and he is not impressed, I'm telling you. My dad, get your fat ass out here, he says to me. Who the hell, what are you doing? You embarrass your mother. What is going on? And, and just, he's just ranting and raving. And I can't blame him. I mean, I really can't blame him. I was a bit of a rascal. And,
Were you?
I mean, I was just talking to the girls too much and talking to Johnny White, my buddy, and I'm just having fun. That's all. I was having fun.
And how sympathetic was your father to the request from the principal that a parent come back to school with you?
Well, you see, Loretta Hargett said that I can't get back into school unless one of my parents comes up. And my father's response to that was, after it was all said and done, and, I don't use this term in vulgarity, I just have to be factual. When my dad wanted to get my attention, and he did more than once, he had an interesting, what I would hope would be an affectionate word, but I'm not sure it was. He would call me fat ass. And my dad would say, fat ass, I ain't going up there. You got your fat ass kicked out, you can get your fat ass back in. That's exactly what my dad. And can you hear him, Freddie?
Oh, yes.
Can you hear my father saying it?
Oh, yes.
My dad was very stern. And my mom is crying. She's president of the PTA. She's the room mother. She's the den mother. She's anything that moves from Scruggs, my mom's in the middle of it. And I go to my mom and go, what's the deal? She says, you have to listen to your dad. I'm not doing anything your dad doesn't say here. So for 2 days, I'm sweating it out. And I'm begging with my dad to go up there. He says, I ain't going up there, fat ass. That's the way it is.
Were you able to successfully change your father's mind?
No. There's no way I could change his mind. And I'm begging with my mom, and my mom was going to do exactly what my dad told her.
So at the end of the 2 days, the sentence is over and it's time to return to the scene of the crime. What did you do?
Well, I mean, it's 2 days later, and my dad's not going to go up. My mom's going to follow the rules here. So I figured, well, I'm going to go up there and talk my way back into school. I mean, I got to get to school. I mean, I got to graduate, So I walked up that hill. I lived at 4439 Dewey. Walked up that hill, Osceola, and I walked into George Hargett's office, and I'm standing in there, and he walks out, and, what are you doing here? Well, I need to get back in school. Where's your mom and dad? They're not coming. He goes, what? Didn't you read? I said, I'm telling you, Mr. Hargett, I know the letter. I understand what this is about, but my father is not coming. And I can't convince my mother to come against his will. So here I am. What you see is what you get. I'm it. And he goes, I don't believe this. Get back in this room. And Mr. Hargett took me in some side room he had off of that main office right there. And there was this little side room, and it had a bunch of like wooden files in it. Looked like a filing room where they might keep records. And it had a very narrow walkway in it. The whole wall was like wooden files built in. And the walkway was very narrow, and at the end of that walkway, I can still see it, was a small desk. And he says, walk down there. So I walked down there, and he said, he opened up the desk, and he took a paddle out.
Oh.
And it was a paddle like you might have when you were initiated to become a Sigma Chi. And I became a Sigma Chi at Cape when I went to school. He said, pull your pants down. I go, what? He says, pull your pants down or you ain't getting back in school. And he paddled me 10 times on my big, fat,
Bet that hurt.
You better right, it hurt.
Was the physical pain a worse hurt than the embarrassment?
No.
This
The
is what they
embarrassment
should
was
do now,
worse.
these kids.
Yes.
And he paddled me. I pulled my pants up. He says, now you can go back in class. But I'll tell you what, right now, if you are ever on that bench again, you are never going to graduate from the school.
Now, how many weeks were left in the semester?
It was about 2 months before we would graduate. It was in the spring, and we graduated in June. And if I recall, I think this happened in April sometime. So we had April, May, and they put me back in her class.
Oh my
So
God.
when you went back, Mrs. Booth was still
Mrs.
there.
Booth is still there because it happened on Monday. She's there for the week. Mrs. Updike was sick. And I came back into the class and
What was your reaction when you saw Terry walk back into your class?
Well, I liked Terry, and I was happy to see him, you know, because I didn't think that was anything too terrible what he had done. But I didn't know about all these
You didn't
other
know the
times.
history.
No, I didn't know his history.
and you didn't know really what had happened to me. Or did Mr. Hargett tell you what was going on? He never told you, huh?
No,
Yeah.
I never knew that.
You never knew that
No.
story.
No.
How long did you stay that semester at Scruggs as a sub?
I can't remember anymore, but I think it was about 2-3 weeks, something like that.
And then,
No, he was an angel.
and then after that episode, you went on your merry way, and Terry went ahead and graduated.
Well, after that, I got tired of substituting, and I decided I was going to quit. So I went downtown to tell them I was quitting. Oh, you're an answer to a prayer. You're an answer to a prayer. And I thought, how could I be an answer to a prayer? But anyhow, they said, you're a math major, aren't you? And I said, yeah. Oh, and you teach math? Yeah. Oh, you got to sign up. We need you. And I said, where do you need me? Oh, we got a high school place for you. Where? I said, I'm not going to go to North St. Louis, I'll tell you that right now. And he said, oh, well, let me think. No, I'm not supposed to tell you, but it's Cleveland High School. Oh, I said, that'll be fine because it's in South St. Louis, and I know South St. Louis. So then but I said, I have to ask my husband first because I said, he'll probably hit the ceiling if I tell him this. So I went home that night and I thought, oh gosh, got to tell him. So I asked him, I said, don't you think it'd be nice if I did something since you have to leave town so much? And he said, oh. And I told him about they're wanting me because they were short. It was Jim, I don't even remember his last name anymore, began with a G, and he had a heart attack, and they were getting substitutes for him, and then he died, and they want to put me in there.
Was it Claire Houston, the principal at Cleveland, that
He was
interviewed
just starting out.
you? Claire Houston?
Yeah, and I had never heard of general math.
So your
life.
first full semester was the fall of '61 in Cleveland High School.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what did you think on the very first day of mathematics class, Algebra 1? There you are, ready to begin your high school teaching career, and into your class walks Terry.
Well, this
Yochum.
one, yeah, oh gosh.
What was your reaction to that?
I don't think I had a reaction because I liked kids. I was an only child. I had never been around, and my dad raised me as a boy. He took me rabbit hunting and stuff like that. And I used to go hunting with boys. And I mean, a boy didn't scare me, if that's what you mean.
Well, I'm curious if you had any sort of reaction like you again, or
No.
You know,
so.
if
What in your first semester, Algebra 1?
Okay.
What kind of student was Terry?
He never gave me any trouble. He was good. But he did have a leading for math. And I got him when we got to geometry. Well, he didn't just walk in my class the first day. I got him later on. Coach Darling brought him in.
Yeah.
And
I got you for geometry, okay?
yeah,
In my sophomore year.
right.
Okay?
That was the first time.
Oh, okay, so
I
you
didn't
didn't
have-
have him freshman year.
No.
Freshman
I
year,
see.
no. I
No.
had algebra from Beckerly.
So
Yeah.
And then I
Now-
had her in
now
my
we're-
sophomore year
So
for geometry.
as I recall,
Yeah.
sophomore year, geometry was the first semester of the sophomore year.
The whole year.
Okay. Now,
See, you had algebra 1, and you did that the whole year.
right.
But when I first started there, they had general math first, and Mr. Houston was introducing me to everybody. He said, it was told that I would be teaching general math, and I got frightened. I thought, what is general math? I had never heard of general math. I had never had a course in it.
Probably these days it would be like fourth grade arithmetic.
Right, you got it, you got it. And anyhow, I went up to him afterwards. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't know how to teach general math. I said, I never had a course in that. And he started laughing. He said, you'll do all right, you'll do fine. I said, no, I won't do fine. I said, could you give me a book so I could, know what the heck it is? Well, he thought it was very funny, but I didn't think it was
I
funny.
think you're right, Freddie. I think it was in the fall, but I didn't like mathematics, so I dodged the geometry class in the fall of '62. But I was forced to take geometry in the spring of
semester
'62
of 62, 63.
during the baseball season.
So, Terry, being this somewhat marginal math student,
Yeah,
but professed in his own mind professional baseball
Yeah.
pitcher in waiting,
yeah,
is now playing varsity baseball
yeah,
for the Cleveland Dutchmen.
yeah.
Self-professed star of the team.
Oh, he's always
So,
professed star or something.
how is he doing in your geometry class at this point?
Horrible.
Horrible?
Yeah.
Is he going to pass the course?
No. I gave
Well,
him an
now-
F the first,
If he does not pass this course,
and he
what
doesn't.
impact does this have on his baseball career?
Well, he gets kicked off the team. He can't play baseball on our team if he's got an F in geometry.
This sounds like a dilemma.
Well, it wasn't for me. All he had to do was buckle down.
So what happened after that?
Well, I started coaching him after school a little bit, and he was a good kid. I mean, he was better than he gave people the impression. I think he was spoiled by his parents before this, because
Really? You think
Yes.
so?
He probably got everything he wanted. Some of these boys had these. You don't have dimples, though, do you?
No dimples. I
No
don't think.
dimples, okay. But they get by with a nice smile and all that stuff and get on the good side of the teacher. And he said, I'll do anything you want me to do, Mrs. Booth. I said, okay, then we'll stay after school, we'll do math. Okay.
How did that work out?
It worked out beautifully. You
Now-
got through, I think, with a B, didn't you?
What happened was, I said, I'll do anything. I mean, I got to play. I got to pitch, right? It was state tournament time, district finals were coming. So she said, well, I'll tell the coach that you will go to practice 30 minutes later, right?
Yeah.
For Coach Niebel and Coach Cliff.
Well, that neat.
And then I'll tutor you and help you. And she did it. She offered it. Because I said, I'll do anything. She offered to do that on her own time. And I then would go to practice 30 minutes late, and it was okay. I was excused to go 30 minutes late because they knew what I was doing, okay? And I had an F. I mean, I'm failing this class. And I wound up getting a B in the class. I don't know
Yeah,
if
I
you
thought
were,
it was a B,
if you
no.
were being kind to me, but
No, I was not kind when it came to math.
Do you think Terry's motivation for
Baseball.
buckling down in your mathematics class had anything whatsoever to do with a love of mathematics, or was this merely...
No, but he had to spend 30 minutes with me every night after school, and he did. I could still see him sitting in the desk, and how do you do this? How do you do that? But we got through with a B, and it was an honest B, because I would not give in to him. Because the people, the baseball players would give in to him.
What lesson do you think that might have taught Terry? That
To
may
stick
have
to
helped him?
things and work hard.
yeah, that's right. And despite the fact that it was Mrs. Booth who put me in the hallway, and I got kicked out because of it, I never ever felt anything ill because I got what I deserved. But
And that I like in him.
I got what I deserved, okay? And it was time to just toe the line, okay? But I remember when she first came to Scruggs, the first day that I was kicked out, and I'll embarrass you now. She was the prettiest teacher I'd ever seen. She was beautiful. I mean, physically beautiful. And, I'm a young boy, and I mean, she's my teacher, but I mean, she was just a beautiful person as well as physically beautiful. And so I got kicked out because I should have, and I never ever held this against her as if I should. It's
Yes.
ridiculous, right? So now I got her for math, and I thought she was still even more beautiful, and I'm failing the class. It's ridiculous, right? And I'm trying a little bit, but it's not working. And here this woman, who she didn't know, I kind of had a crush on her. I was 15 years old. She offers to help me so I can pitch in the district finals.
What kind of lessons has that taught you that you've been able to apply to your later life?
Well, having eventually become a teacher myself, how could you even believe that, right?
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
It's caused me to, as a radiologist now, you think of things three-dimensionally, right? And I taught for 12 years in full-time chiropractic education, 3 years in Chicago, 3 years at Logan College in St. Louis, and 3 years in Melbourne, Australia, at the Melbourne University School of Chiropractic. And, Mrs. Booth, I just didn't get math very good. And as a teacher, I would have 10 or 15%, maybe 20% of the students I would teach, they didn't think three-dimensionally very well. And to
That's
look at an
bad.
x-ray, you have to have a little perception of three-dimension. And I would often have 10, 15, 20% of the students I would teach, whether there's 50 or 100 in the class, who would struggle with the three dimensions of x-ray, and often they were very good students. But, they just would struggle. And I can tell you this, that I never forgot what she did for me. And I would extend myself for any of those students to help them pass, because they were working hard and they wanted to become a good doctor of chiropractic. And between me and them stood this x-ray class. By the way, stood a lot of x-ray classes, stood 300 hours of radiology. And I remember many a student. I remember one girl, she was a mature age, she was a teacher, Loretta, at the school in Australia where I taught. And she was a very fine student, and she just didn't get it. Fred, I just didn't get geometry. I didn't get it, man, And she worked so hard, and this was standing between her and maybe graduating. And I spent extra time with her because I didn't forget Mrs. Booth.
Now, Loretta, I understand over the years since Terry graduated and went on to his professional career, he has kept in contact with you on a fairly regular basis.
We exchanged Christmas cards.
Could you talk about your later experiences with Terry and how he's kept in touch with you?
A sock hop, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, over at Cleveland High School, we'd have these anniversary deals one of them was at the
80th anniversary.
80th, yeah.
The big one.
And then we had another one at that ballroom down.
The Hyatt downtown, the 85th anniversary.
Yeah,
Well,
but we
and
had
then
one
at
at the
Casaloma.
Casaloma, yeah.
We had a party, yeah.
Right, we had a party, and he came up and started talking to me, and I just talked to him more and more, and I got better acquainted with the man instead of the kid.
Yeah, we had a.
How has that been for an experience?
Well, it hasn't been, I don't think, an experience.
How would you say he's turned out as a man?
Well, he's turned out fine, except he put on a little weight.
Haven't we all?
Yes, we have.
It'd be good for us to mention in 1994, or 92, I think it was, Fred, we organized, with the help of my mother and my sister, Kay Yochum, Kay Morris, Louise Vichner, Fred Weissman, who's doing this interview, we put together a 1960s sock hop, remember?
Yeah.
Now, we went to high school. Fred graduated same class with me in 1965. And you'd go to a high school reunion, and I'd see
Yeah.
you at some of the reunions.
Chaperone.
But we didn't, we didn't go to school with kids for 1 year. And Fred and I came up with this idea with my sister that we would throw a sock hop at the Casaloma Ballroom, and it would be for the 60s, from 1960 through 69. So the 4 years that you went to school with kids, right?
Yeah.
So we hired the ballroom, and Fred and my sister did, with my mom, an enormous amount of work. We rented the ballroom. We got Marcel Strong to play, and we got Bob Cuban to show up that night, remember?
Yeah.
And the mother and father of Walter Notice, Walter Scott from Bob Cuban's band came.
Yeah.
And if you recall, You were there with Mrs. Mann that night, and there were a bunch of our teachers. Max Carlisle were there,
Yeah.
and Seymour was there.
My husband was there.
Your husband was
Yeah.
there. We had the second largest attendance of a Cleveland High School function in the history of the school. We had 900 people at the Casa Loma Ballroom. Paid $15 to get in there, say hello. We had a great time. A lot of the faculty came. And then we had one in 94, right, Fred?
Mm-hmm.
And in 94 you came again. And remember we had the kids dance. We had Kay's kids and my
Right.
kids dance.
Yeah.
And we had this band and the DJ. We just had a great old... The second one had 750 people.
Wow.
So we had two functions in 92 and 94 that were just knock your eyes out
Yeah.
functions where we had lots of fun. But you know, I think it would be important to say something here because I only had you for the one class at Cleveland in geometry. Okay, I had Beckerly for algebra, and after geometry, I looked at trigonometry and I went the other way. No trigonometry, right? But I often ask this question when I'm out lecturing at different universities, at the medical school or the chiropractic school, and the question, and it'd be interesting, probably you would know this.
Probably I wouldn't.
What was my grade point average when I graduated from Cleveland High School?
Oh my gosh, no.
And what was my rank in class? And I'll often ask this when I'm out lecturing because the different students that might attend my lectures who actually may have purchased this book I've written, I think might have a certain image of how I might have done in school. And they'll often guess, and usually
Yeah.
it's higher than what it is. You know, my grade point average when I graduated from Cleveland High School was 2.0. I had my rank in class was 250 in a class of 500.
Oh my gosh.
And
I never knew that.
yeah.
Of
And
course, you know, there's a whole lot of other kids besides him in Cleveland
yeah,
High
you-
School at this time.
You taught hundreds.
Yeah.
But what I was most proud of is the fact that I made the varsity baseball team as a freshman, and I lettered as a freshman, and as a pitcher, I don't think that had been maybe done in a while. Then I went to Cape Girardeau to play baseball and did pre-med. Didn't do much better there either. You know, I needed a 2.5 to get into chiropractic college. That was the minimum. I had to do 2 years pre-med. And my grade point average to get into the National College of Chiropractic was 2.5. Okay?
Yeah.
And all the great report cards that I got from Mrs. Essex and Ruth Updike and
I never knew those were.
Mr. Fields, all those people that I had at Scruggs, report cards, they always showed the same thing.
Oh,
They all the teachers like you all said the same thing. Terry has great potential. Terry doesn't focus. Terry doesn't concentrate. Terry doesn't this. Terry does, Terry had. It was always the same. And my grade things, when we had these grade school cards, we had conduct. Remember, Fred? And we had conduct and work habits, right? And on 90% of all my grade cards, and I have them. My mom kept them.
yeah,
Was unsatisfactory.
yeah.
Unsatisfactory work habits, unsatisfactory conduct. Terry plays too much, Terry daydreams, Terry talks too much, Terry does this, Terry does that. It drove my parents crazy. But when we took the Iowa board test, the aptitude test, and I was always scored like the top 20%, And what I think is really interesting is then and I've looked through some scrapbooks now and preparing for some of the stuff. I had an English composition class
Yeah.
in Cape Girardeau. Mrs. Parrish, D-.
Oh my gosh.
D- in English composition. And I go on to write a book.
Yeah, I
It
know.
sells 100,000 copies, and
Yeah.
it's a bit
Now,
strange.
did you have a ghostwriter with you?
No, that book was not ghostwritten. But see, the difference, Mrs. Booth, is that the focus was on something that was my passion.
Yeah.
My passion was bone and joint and skeletal radiology, and it was a scientific thing. I just couldn't write short stories, Fred. I mean, I couldn't create a story. I couldn't do it. And
Everybody's
so the
different.
stories I write, I'm writing about baseball.
Who was your English composition teacher in high school?
Mr. Doxey was his name, and
Oh, he was an old guy, wasn't
old
he?
guy, and he taught my father at Cleveland High School.
Oh my
dad.
gosh.
And he was there 1 year.
He was a real nice
and
guy.
Nice guy, and
Yeah.
and then he retired. But Mr. Doxey taught me English there at Cleveland,
Yeah.
and I have to be honest with you, I never took any books home hardly at all. I mean, I had Mrs. Robinson for Spanish. And
oh yeah, I know.
remember her?
I remember her. Yeah.
And I had Spanish, and I'll be very honest, I used to take the book home, and I took it directly to my dad's office, and Tala Broyles was my dad's nurse, and my dad was a chiropractor, practiced in South St. Louis, down by Carlette Park, and I conned my dad's nurse into doing my Spanish homework,
Oh no.
because, why would I want to study? I mean, I don't need to study Spanish, I mean, I was always
Study baseball.
study baseball. Let's go play baseball, right? So, in the story I tell these students when I'll be autographing a book at a college or something, excuse me, is when I got to the chiropractic college in Chicago, I realized that my baseball career is over. I'm not good enough. I'm not going, and I certainly wasn't left-handed. Secondly, Vietnam is on. If I lose my student deferment, I'm going to Vietnam. Lottery number, forget about it, Fred, 57. I'm toast, right? So for the first and only time, Mrs. Booth, in my entire life,
You
I
studied?
studied to the greatest ability. And I said to myself, if I flunk out of the school or I don't stay here,
Yeah.
it's because I don't have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
And I got my first report card, which I have a copy of, in the scrapbook my mother kept for me.
And she
And I
fainted.
got 4 A's and a B.
Oh my gosh.
Now,
Did your mother faint?
Well, I never showed it to my parents.
Oh.
When I got this report card, I may be many things, but a dishonest person is not one
Yeah,
of them.
I
I'm
know
not
that.
capable of being dishonest or lying. I got this report card, Fred, and I said, there must be a mistake. Because we got our report cards then, they were issued by Social Security number. Confidentiality, it was unusual even back then. So I went in to see Dean Louis Bierman at National College, and I said to the dean, Dr. Bierman, I think there's been a mistake. And I tell this story to students to motivate them. This is probably not.
That's good.
This is probably not my grades.
Yeah.
I think I got somebody else's grades, and I can't do that. I can't take somebody else's grades. You need to check my teachers.
Yeah.
I've never got no 4 A's and a B in my life, and I don't think I got them now either. Okay. So they go back to my instructors. 2 days later, the dean of medicine calls me back in, and he says, Terry, they've regraded. They've checked. These are your grades. And then, and only then, did I send a copy of those grades to my parents. And finally, they say, finally, And then I, grasped my passion. I had a 3.79 cumulative grade point average.
Uh-huh.
I graduated 7th in a class of 150,
Oh, good.
and I was voted president of my class. And I then found my passion beyond baseball.
Yeah.
So I had the ability, and my wife, Inga, God bless her, never wanted me to tell that story to my children because she would always feel the kids should be studying and stuff. I never studied. I mean, the only
didn't
time,
have to.
The only time I studied in high school was when I had to get by geometry and I was cheating in Spanish to get through. Outside of that, I never took a book home in 4 years. Never.
See, you can't cheat in math.
No, you couldn't cheat. That was,
No.
I
Yeah.
couldn't cheat it through,
She
right?
teaches math at St. Mary's.
Yeah, and,
And
you
she
can't
knows.
you can't do that.
No, you
But then when
can't.
I got into college and I realized this is going to be my vocation and I'm not interested in going to Vietnam, I put the pedal to the metal
Yeah.
and I got the job done. And I tell that story in front of many
That's good
students
for some of them.
to let them think to themselves, you know what? Here's a guy who came from South St. Louis with an ordinary background, with a not very good work ethics. But you know what? When he focused and was prepared to put the hammer down,
Yeah.
look what he was able to do. And that will motivate some kid in an audience to say, you know what,
Yeah.
maybe I could do something important
Right.
someday.
Yeah.
And I'm
If
not
I
the
just got off my duff and applied myself.
and I'm not the best
Yeah.
student. Guess what? Terry Yochum wasn't either. And he wrote this best-selling radiology textbook. So I tell that story
That's a good story.
to motivate
Yeah.
these students. And in that story, I talk about you
Oh my gosh.
every time I tell it.
Huh.
And now,
About your mean math teacher?
and now in this interview, we've got it for forever, right?
Right.
Well,
is
I don't
great.
know that the focus is on the mean math teacher as
No.
much as the honest and motivating math teacher
Well.
who actually extended herself to do something to cause Terry to begin
Well,
to grow up a little bit
Yeah.
and take responsibility and see the cause and effect. And if
Yeah.
you apply yourself, this is what you get. And
Yeah.
if you don't, this is what you get.
You taught me a lesson that, right, You know, like
Loretta, Sisters of Loretta.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
like my dad used to
Yeah.
say, right's right, wrong's nobody.
Oh,
My dad used
yeah,
to say,
that's
right's
good.
right, wrong's
Yeah,
nobody.
Yeah.
And so I realized that this is the way it ought to be. Mrs. Booth is going to toe the line. Yeah, that's a little bit hard, but then you opened your heart to me,
Yeah.
and you stayed after school and you taught me. I never forgot it. And I've done
thank
it.
you.
I've done it for hundreds of students.
Well,
In
good.
12 years, I've taught thousands of students, and I've had hundreds who struggle with the three dimensions of reading an X-ray, reading an MRI scan. I mean, this is very technical stuff, you know. And some of the best math students in the world can't read an X-ray, Loretta.
I believe it.
You know, I mean, they struggled, you know.
Yeah.
And so I just wasn't very good
Yeah.
with geometry and parallelograms
Right.
and triangles and stuff. I just didn't have it, you know.
Well, it went beyond that to proving things,
Yes.
and that's analyzing things. But when you once get that, that applies to other things in the world.
And you know, I had a great. Fred Weissman went with my mother to the 80th Cleveland reunion. It was down at the Hyatt Regency, Fred, and Johnny White was there, who will be interviewed here soon, and we were all there. And there were a lot of people there that night. And you were there, sitting at an honored table with all the faculty, you know, and Earl Jansen was still alive, the
Oh,
great
yeah.
Earl
Yeah.
Jansen, and Cliff, and you know all these teachers. Mr.
Right,
Beckley
Cliff
was
was
there,
there.
Max Carlisle was
Wow.
there, Mrs. Mann was there, and a gentleman came up to my table. I was sitting with my date was my mother.
Well, that's sweet.
My dad was gone at that
Oh,
time. My date was my
that's
mother.
that early?
My dad was gone. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, my dad died New Year's Eve, 1989.
my gosh.
And so this gentleman came up to me and said, you know, Dr. Yochum, I'd like to introduce myself. I don't remember his name, okay? But he was a chiropractor. And he
Oh.
was a 1980 graduate of Cleveland College. And he had gone to the Logan College of Chiropractic here in Chesterfield, Missouri. And he introduced himself, told me he had a copy of my book, told me I had autographed his book at a seminar somewhere, my textbook on Essentials of Skeletal Radiology. He said, you know, Dr. Yochum, I'd like to tell you a story. It's all about you and being in grade school. I go, what?
What?
Yeah, but, yeah, he says, I have one of your grade school teachers over here. It wasn't Mrs. Booth, it was Mrs. Essex.
Oh,
She was my 7th grade teacher. Did you know her at Scruggs?
No.
Probably not.
no.
She taught 7th grade, and you used to sub most of the grades, but usually 8th grade.
Yeah.
And she was a 7th grade teacher at Scruggs. And he says, she's right over here at this table. And, you know, I'd like to tell you that she's a patient of mine.
Oh my gosh.
And I'd like to also tell you that she was a longtime patient of your father, Dr. Kenneth Yochum.
Oh my gosh.
I go, really? Yeah. But I'd like to also tell you something else. Is after your dad died, I got her because she was in the same church where my parents were. And that's how Mrs. Essex got referred to me. She had been to your father off and on, and her family and whatever. And on one of the visits that she was in there being treated, I told her that, you know, Dr. Yochum had a son, Terry, who became, you know, kind of famous. And he wrote a book. And you know, Dr. Yochum, she didn't believe it.
Oh really?
She said to me, no, you have it wrong. His father, Kenneth, was a very scholarly person. Terry was not a scholarly person. There's no way Terry Yochum wrote a book. And the guy said, Mrs. Essex, I'm telling you, Terry wrote a book on X-ray. He became a radiologist. No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. He said, well, I have the book at home. And the next time you come in, I'm going to bring the book in. I'm going to show it to you. So he did that on her subsequent visit. And he showed her the book that I wrote. And she was absolutely speechless. Astonished would be the word. This chiropractor told me. And she's shaking her head. I can't believe it. His daddy was a very scholarly, good, and he was not a good student, and I can't believe he's written this book. And he tells me that story, Fred, the night we were together. And he
Really?
then waltzes me over to the table, and you were sitting at that same table, a little far away from Mrs. Essex.
Uh-huh.
And he introduced me to her. She was like at that point in time, high in her 70s probably.
Oh,
And,
goodness.
and she, greeted me, and I remember recognizing her, and we talked a little bit. He says, your dad was a great chiropractor, and he had tremendous hands on him. I said, yeah, he was a heck of a lot better than me, I can assure you. And she just was shaking her head a little bit, and she said, I still can't believe you could have written a book. She was just astonished, And so Inga always never wanted me to tell my kids that story, because Inga, my lovely wife, always wanted our kids to be good, diligent students through school. And I understood that, and my children were. They went to Christian school, Philip and Kimberly and Alicia, and they were good students through high school, and I wasn't. And I tell that story to students who are now in professional school to motivate them that you can be whatever you want to be in this world.
Yeah.
If you believe in yourself and you're prepared to work hard, you can accomplish whatever you want.
Also, if you have in you the ability too, you have the ability which was hidden,
Yes.
and you never called on it.
I never called on it,
Yeah.
Loretta, and my teachers would always write, Terry has such great potential. Terry, Fred Weissman, the best man at my wedding, was a much better student than I through school, much better. And I'm playing around, we're playing baseball together, and Jack, and I don't know what it was. I just, if you looked at my little grade school book, okay, I'm going to find that book, and I'm going to have that book be part of this. You know how we had books, roses are red, violets are blue, where are you going, and you tell these little stories. On that little book, when I graduated, Scruggs, June 1961, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be? And there are 2 lines there. It's my handwriting. Okay?
Yeah.
I still have this book.
Uh-huh.
I want to pitch for the St. Louis Cardinals, baseball. And the second line, I want to be a good chiropractor like my dad. And I wrote it when I was in 8th grade. And I'll tell you one thing that I think was a great benefit for me, is when I came out, and I feel for these kids who go to college, when I failed in baseball, and I wasn't good enough, I'm not fooling myself, I wasn't good enough. I at least knew where I wanted to go, Fred. I was focused that, okay, I didn't make it in baseball, well, I'm now going to be a chiropractor, and the pathway was clear. There are thousands of kids in this school whose pathway is major undecided.
Oh yeah.
I want to stop right here and touch on something you just said that I believe is a very telling thing that just came out of your mouth. What on earth would possess you to even say you failed at baseball?
Well, I guess I failed at my greatest dream, Fred. My greatest dream was to pitch for the Cardinals, and I just kind of wasn't good enough. And you remember the Mets and the Cardinals were looking at me. We played on the same team together.
Yeah.
I pitched for Anheuser-Busch. I pitched 4 years for Cleveland. I looked at my record thing there through the old scrapbook. I was 13 wins and 4 losses for Cleveland. I lettered for 4 years. Pitched at Cape. But, my dad said 4 things. I'm standing outside the funeral parlor. One of our buddies, Ron Bazikas, got killed in Vietnam.
Yeah, I remember
Ron?
that, yeah.
Sure.
Ronnie got killed in Vietnam. Ron
Yeah.
was a good player. And, my dad, I'm standing in the back of Southern Funeral Parlor, and the Mets are talking to me. They were scouting me when I played for Watterson Boys Club, was it?
Mm-hmm.
You and I played together. And, I wanted to do this, Fred. I mean, I wanted it more than anything. And my dad in the back of the room, sitting there, we were at Bazikis' funeral. Coach Cliff was there, everybody was there. And my dad said, there's 4 good reasons why you ain't going. Number 1, it ain't enough money. They were talking $3,000-4,000. Number 2, you ain't big enough. Now, I would have argued, Fred. I don't know. I'd value your opinion. But I was 6 foot 185 when I left high school. I felt like I was big enough. Now, I wasn't model big enough. Today, you got to be 6'4", model 220, right? But I felt at that time and I was probably going to get a little bigger. So I would have argued at that point with my dad, but I never argued with my dad, okay? I accepted what
Wasn't
my
a good
dad
thing
said.
to do.
Wasn't a good thing. And thirdly, I'm a chiropractor, son. I don't have any stroke or political stroke or influence in baseball, so I can't help you. That was number 3. And number 4, and most importantly, son, you need to understand why I'm not going to let you go, okay? Because I don't think it's going to happen. You're not left-handed. Son, you should have been left-handed. You're not left-handed, and you're going to chiropractic school. That's it.
Of all the people in our generation who played baseball, what percentage do you think signed with a major league professional organization and actually made it to the major leagues?
That number is so small you can't measure it. But I will tell you this. There were 4 pretty good pitchers at Cleveland High School that you and I played with. I would like to believe I was one of them. Jan Schmidt, Terry Yochum, Ron Kinney, and Jerry Saborn. Jan Schmidt was right-handed. I was right-handed. Ron Kinney was left-handed. Jerry Saborn was left-handed. Jerry Saborn and Ron Kinney both signed professional contracts and went and played minor league baseball with the St. Louis Cardinals. And the 2 right-handers never did. Now, neither one of those guys ever made it, Fred. But I kind of would like to have had my name in the book. They were
Well-
both left-handed, and neither one of them were bigger than me, and neither one of them, in my mind, were any better than me. But they were left-handed, and it gave them a huge advantage.
The fact that you were unable to achieve a virtually unattainable goal, how does that equate to failure in your mind?
Well, I guess I've always been a goal-oriented person, and I was someone who could, try to see that light at the end of the tunnel, and work to that goal. And if I didn't obtain what would have been considered in my mind the ultimate goal, then I failed. Maybe failure is not the right word, Fred. Honestly, Fred, I had more success in baseball than I had failure.
Well, that's my next question.
I did.
How old were you when this alleged failure occurred? 17, 18, 19?
Well, no. When I went to Cape and I pitched for Joe Ewells at Cape, okay, is when the Mets and the Cardinals were kind of talking to me. And that's when my dad put the hammer down and said, you're not going.
And how old were you?
19 years old.
All right. And how old are you now?
I was born 23rd of February 1947. I just turned 60.
And what are you still doing?
I'm actually still pitching baseball in a 38 and over league in Denver, and I've just entered my 16th season of pitching senior semi-pro baseball.
And so, given the fact that you probably started playing baseball at the age of 12,
I started at the age of 10 on Arts Camera Shop in Lee May, Missouri.
so you've had a 50-year career.
Actually, Fred, I never counted it, but you're right. I've had yes, that's true.
How many major league pitchers, true stars of the game, have had a 50-year career?
Most of them, when they're done, have blown their arm out, and I don't think too many, to be honest with you.
So I find it ludicrous that you would evaluate your career in baseball with the word failure in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I appreciate that comment. I guess I failed at I failed at a goal that was probably in many ways almost unattainable, right?
Exactly.
It's such a narrow pathway to become a professional athlete.
The difference between success at any career at a measurably successful level and the elite level, whether it's the teaching profession, chiropractic profession, or professional sports, is very small. And only the elite of the elite make it in professional sports. And to have sustained a successful career for 50 years at anything is not a failure.
Yeah, and one thing I will.
Would you agree that any teacher who lasts in the teaching profession for 40 or 50 years cannot be looked at as a teaching failure?
Well, yeah, I guess so, but there are some bad ones that get through.
Well, yes, but in the case of a career in athletics,
No, in that,
you won't.
no.
You know, I've been blessed that I really believe God blessed me with a strong arm. Because being a radiologist, I spent a lifetime finding rotator cuff tears and ending guys' careers as a radiologist. My arm is still okay. I certainly can't throw as hard as I used to, Fred. It's chuck and duck now, playing in a 38 and over league at 60, okay? But I have no pain in my arm. My arm is okay. And I think between chiropractic and having taken good care of myself, conditioning, I've been able to pitch that long. And for me, it's been a blessing, I can tell you. It has given me an outlet that has kept me alive and spirited. As a radiologist, I sit on my butt reading x-rays all day long, in a dark room with these light and shadows here, It gets me outside, the smell of the grass, the rosin bag, it's been wonderful. And so I had the benefits. I ended my career at the age of 31 at Heine Miney Field, pitching for Cronlet Sunday Morning Athletic Club. And I then went to Australia, and there was no baseball in Australia. I mean, you go to Australia, there's no baseball in Australia.
Why'd you go to Australia?
I went to Australia to teach at the chiropractic college there at the Melbourne University to start a new school.
Yeah.
And I was still, I was 31 years old. I was still in good physical shape, but I played baseball in Australia. Really kind of unique story. One of my students in the class comes to me within. It's just baseball's been part of my whole life, friend. He says, Laurie Davidson, a student in my class in Australia, comes up and says, Dr. Yochum, there's a student over in Preston, the suburb of Melbourne here, who's an American who said he played against you in the semi-pro league in Chicago when you were pitching for the Naperville Cardinals and he was playing for the Berwyn Oaks. I go, what? Yeah, his name's Richard Tucker. Used to play tennis with him, and you pitched against him. He played Double-A professional ball for the St. Louis Cardinals. He was a catcher. You pitched against him. Weren't you a pitcher, Dr. Yochum? I mean, I don't know this kid from nowhere. I'm in Australia like 6 weeks, and this guy's giving me this. Oh, yeah, he's a Yank. He's here over helping run the president of the Victorian Chiropractic Association's practice. I go, okay, fine. He says, why don't you come out and play on our team? I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm done in baseball now. Because, Fred, at the age of 31, pitching against guys 18, 19, 20, they were going out faster than they were coming in, Fred. There were no 30 and over, 40 and over, 50 and over. If you wanted to play baseball at 31 to 35, you're going to pitch against 19, 20-year-old kids coming out of college, and it was tough. So right at the end of my career, it was hard for me to compete and win at the highest level. So I knew it was time to quit, right? Because I respect the game too much. And so long story short, he just stays after me to come out and do this, right? I said, okay, all right. I'll come pitch batting practice as long as you let me hit. Because I was a pitcher who believed I could hit. And I started at third base, and I think I could hit, Fred. You played enough ball with me, but I could never hit home runs, but I was a pretty good hitter. And they made me a pitcher because I had a strong arm. If you'll let me hit batting practice, I'll come through a batting practice. So I did. It was fun. They let me hit. It was fun, okay? Bunch of young kids, 3 or 4 of them chiropractic students on this one team. And, come do it again. So I went and did it again. About a month later, I get a call from the coach, okay? And he says, Dr. Yochum, we're in big trouble here. We got to play a doubleheader, 2 7-inning games, and my other second starting pitcher has got a bad arm, and I got no pitching. And if I don't win these 2 games, we're not going to get to play in the Claxton Shield finals I'm down for the count here. And can you come pitch this game? I go, I'm not on the team. How can I come pitch the game in the playoffs and whatever? I don't think I can do that. And no, I've seen you pitch. You've got talent. Come do this. Well, I'll be honest with you. I agreed to go pitch that game really for one reason. There was more than one reason that I did it, but the major reason was my wife had an aunt who lived in Melbourne. Her name was Francesca Valny, my wife's godmother from Germany. She lived in Australia for 60 years.
Oh my
And when I
goodness.
went to Melbourne, she had an aunt there, and I loved her very much. She was a wonderful person, and she just thought it was the neatest thing that I used to play baseball. And she liked to know about baseball a bit, which was interesting to me, being in Australia. Because there, it was cricket, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, if I go pitch this game, I can take Francie. And Francie can see it. And there was a Yank, Larry Rosenbaum, who was teaching at the school, who was a buddy of mine, who I used to play football with, who never saw me pitch. And I didn't think he thought I could probably pitch very good at all. And I think I'm going to show him I can do it. So I take Larry Rosenbaum and his wife and Francie, and I go to pitch this game. But
Hope
I
you
really,
practice.
huh?
I hope you did a little practice.
Yeah, I did the best I could. I showed up, and it was a summer day in the park in Melbourne against this team, right? And the team I pitched for was called Coburg. It was a suburb like Chesterfield, right? Coburg, Victoria, right? Suburb of Melbourne, Australia. So I go over there, and they're sitting on a picnic thing, and they got this and that, right? And I go warm up, okay? And I'm in a pen, warming up. Now I'm done, Fred. You were a pitcher, Freddie. You got to warm up. You got to get your head straight. You got to get mentally prepared for a game. I always did. There was jitters I'd go through, and I get diarrhea sometimes in big games. I get emotionally upset, and I'd have diarrhea. I'm not kidding you, because I wanted to win, and I wanted to do the best I could. So I finished the warm up in the pen, and I'm coming towards the dugout in the field, and here comes the coach. Okay? Here comes the coach. It's Laurie Davidson's father, Laurie Davidson Sr., right? Laurie Davidson was my student and got me to do this. He says, listen, Dr. Yochum, I got to tell you something. You can't talk today. Loretta, I kind of like to talk,
Yeah, oh, yes, you do.
I go, what do you mean I can't talk today? He said, you are playing under an assumed name. You are Colin Alexander today. You are the Australian Colin Alexander. You cannot open your mouth. Because if you open your mouth on one thing with 3 words, they are going to know that you are a Yank and you're not an Australian and you are not Colin Alexander, and we're going to lose this game by forfeit. So I don't care how bad the umpire is. I don't care anything. You can't even talk to a coach or a colleague or a teammate. You must keep your
gosh.
mouth shut this entire game. Fred, you played a lot of baseball games with me. We played in high school. We played Waterson. We played Anheuser-Busch. I talk. I like to talk. My nickname was Silver Lip when I was on the bench. When I wasn't pitching, I was ripping them.
Loretta, have you ever seen Terry in a situation where he was unable to speak?
No, never.
Wow.
So, Freddie, I go to the mound knowing that I'm playing as an assumed name, Colin Alexander, and I can't say a word. And let me tell you, this umpire is horrible. He's missing him right and left, Fred. He can't call him. He needs to punch a hole in that mask, Freddie. He's missing these pitches right and left, and I can't say a word, Fred. And when I batted, he called me out on a pitch so far outside I need a golf club to hit it, Fred. And I would normally have a few choice words for the umpire, the man in blue. I just looked at him, Loretta. I carried my bat back to the dugout, and he can pitch, but he can't talk. Oh my God, that's an Australian experience, and it may wind up being the topic of one of the chapters in this book. It was an amazing experience, but baseball's been around my life. It's kept me. I started in the senior league. I got back in playing baseball because of chiropractic. I wound up treating Tony Muser, who was the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers AAA team in Denver, the Denver Zephyrs. Long story short, he allowed me to pitch batting practice. Somebody saw me, told me about a senior league. 1994, Fred. I never heard about no senior league, 40 and over league. I went out there with some coaxing. He called me every week for 3 weeks, 4 weeks in a row. Then vanity sets in. I'm 44 years old. Maybe I still can pitch.
I can still do it.
Maybe I can still pitch, right? You know. In the meantime, I've been coaching kids. I've been coaching my son. You know, I'm still involved in baseball, but I'm done. You know, my career's over. And I am so thankful to Bill Miller, the manager of that team, who had pitched in the minor league organization for the Cleveland Indians. He was left-handed. That he never stopped calling me. You know, I have a World Series ring right here. I'm pretty proud of this World Series ring. In 1998, my 50 and over team won a national championship with this, and we were the best out of 50 teams. And I pitched. See that? And I pitched against the Rhode Island Reds and the Dallas Cardinals. They were, and I helped manage some teams, and started my own team in Denver. And I'm kind of proud of what we did and what we accomplished. And you know, it wasn't just winning and losing, Fred. You know, when you have a teammate, the camaraderie amongst guys, I missed that, Fred. And you know, that ribbon back and forth, and he'd be teasing me and I'd be teasing him, and the fun, that camaraderie, I missed that. Sitting in a view box by myself, it's a lonely trip. And I think that, and you know how much I have to love this game to hurt and be as sore as I am on Monday and Tuesday after I pitch a game at my age? Do you know how much you got to love this game to be in as much stiffness and pain that I would be? The normal pain, the normal stiffness that you would get pitching, just magnified, Fred, because at 44, 45, 50, 52, 53, I pitched all the way through. From the age of 44, I'm 60 now. So you got to love this game a whole lot to hurt like that, Fred. And it really has never left me. The grip of baseball has never left me.
When you were teaching at Cleveland, did you follow the sports teams very much?
Well, I went to some of their games, you know, especially the football games.
Yeah, the football.
Yeah. And then I'd go to their swimming deals too. In fact, one of their best swimmers married my other daughter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That isn't wonderful.
Do you have
I
any
think.
recollection of seeing any baseball games that Terry might have pitched in?
No. No.
You know, the big deal, Fred, was football.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and my dad wouldn't let me play football, despite the fact Coach Cliff came after me to play.
Well, I think that was smart.
Well, the
because-
reason was, you know,
Right.
when I came into high school, I was kind of a touted player, and my dad
Right.
was afraid I'd hurt my arm, and you know, maybe he had some aspirations that I might be good enough to play college ball, maybe not professional. I thought I could play professional ball. So Coach Cliff came a couple of times after my dad to get me, you know, to do that. I couldn't do it. You know, honestly, then they wanted me to play basketball. Couldn't do that either. Had white man's disease, couldn't jump, right? And then they took me to Doc Singer. They kept wanting me to keep fit in the fall so I could pitch in the spring. So I went to Doc Singer. I tried out for the swimming team, almost damn near drowned. I couldn't swim fast enough. Then Cliff used to teach Wesley, remember? Coach
Yeah,
Cliff taught
right.
Wesley. Okay. It was all about keep Terry fit so he can pitch in the spring, right? So I go out for the wrestling team. That's a joke, Fred. I almost smothered and asphyxiated trying to wrestle. So I was nothing but an average athlete at anything else but baseball. I just didn't excel at any of it. And we played some flag football, you and I, and stuff, but you know, I was average. But in baseball, God gave me a good arm. And I loved the game, and I loved the challenge, and you know, and I really think that the game itself, the fact that they took me from third base, Fred, and put me on the mound, I think changed my life. Because you know, Loretta, the mound of a baseball field is 10.5 inches high. They lowered that mound in 1968 because a guy by the name of Bob Gibson had an ERA of 1.18, and they lowered the mound from 10 feet, okay? I mean, you're talking about inches now.
Yeah.
It was 10 and a half inches. It used to be 11 plus inches, and they lowered it to 10 and a half inches
Who did this?
because of Bob Gibson. Major League Baseball, because they said Bob Gibson was, you know,
too
he had
big.
the mound was too high and he was getting too much drive. So it is, so when you go out onto a baseball field, if I can give you a metaphor, okay? You're placed up on a mound higher than anyone else. Everyone else is on flat ground. But when you assume the mound, you are then 10 and a half inches higher than anyone else. And nothing happens, Mrs. Booth, until you throw the ball. So in my hand, I had control of that ball and that game. And the focus of attention was on me, or on Fred Weissman when he pitched, or Ron Kinney or Jan Smith. And the game went as you went as a pitcher. Would you agree, Freddie?
Absolutely.
It would dominate the game. So it changed my personality. Because I went from a third baseman who could hit and catch the ball with a strong arm to a pitcher. And then when I got on all these really good teams, Doc Ryan's team, Southern Funeral Parlor, Anheuser-Busch for Johnny MacArthur, and all these teams, I didn't get to play much else. I just got to pitch. Because there were better guys than me at third base. There were better guys in the outfield who could run fast. You watch me run, it was like a rain delay. I wasn't very fast, Loretta. So, you know, but I could pitch. And they used to always kid me, you know, Freddie could outrun me. I wasn't very fast. But I could pitch. And
You'll have a rather graphic description of your running ability on a previous interview.
I don't doubt that's probably the end. Very true. I won't deny it. I couldn't run very fast. But I used to tell them, how fast do I have to run from the dugout to the mound, sir? And when I get on the mound, I'm going to take control of this game. And I enjoyed the challenge of that, right? And I think because the focus of attention would come to you, it changed my personality because I wound up becoming, in many ways, focused later in life. I became someone who was able to motivate people. Freddie, when Johnny White and I lived on Tennessee, John's going to be interviewed here in a minute. I knew John when I was 3 years old. Johnny White,
upstairs.
he's upstairs.
Yeah.
He's going to be interviewed. I knew John when I was 3 years old. We went to transition. Remember transition? Before kindergarten? I went to transition with John. And we were playing ball and stuff together. And I remember dragging a bat home from Cleveland High School with Johnny White. And I'm crying.
Too heavy?
And my mom at 4509 Tennessee comes up to me, and Johnny stopped because his house was here next to Ronnie Eisenhower, Big Ike, and I was 3 or 4 houses down. And my mom said, Terry, what's wrong? Did you get hit with the ball? Did you get hurt or something? I said, no, Mom. I said, there's nobody left to play with. I wore them all out. I'm a person who's had a lot of energy and a drive to accomplish things. And I think it all started, Fred, when I was put in a center of focused attention. Whether I wanted it or not, I never wanted to be a pitcher, Fred. My mom always said you should stay at third base because you were a good hitter. Because when you got the pitch, they never let you hit. And my hitting skills never got any better. I'm not fooling myself, you know. But my mom hated. My mother hated the fact that I pitched. You know why? Because my and it would be in these big games, like Darling was needing me to pitch some big game, right? And the pressure, and my mom just hated the pressure. Because, you know, oh, your son, how's your son? Is he going to do good? Oh, you know, because if I didn't pitch good, the team might not win. And we were on ragamuffin teams, Fred.
Oh, yeah.
C.J. Narrett, Waterston. We were playing against a lot better teams. But, if I pitched well and the team played a little bit, we could win. And my mom hated that pressure. You know, herself, emotionally, you know, she felt it for me. I'm her 14-year-old son out here, and she felt the whole pressure of that.
Are you her only boy?
I'm the only boy. I have one sister, 2 years younger than me, Kay Annette.
Yeah.
Kay Annette, you taught Kay.
Yeah.
Kay had you for math. And
Did she think I was bad?
you know what? I don't think she think you were bad, and I think Freddie was. I think Johnny was just kidding you. That's all. Johnny was telling you a story earlier. Maybe one last story to close, Fred. I started Cleveland High School in the fall of '61, same year you did, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't know Fred because Fred went to.
I went to Blow School.
Oh, that was for the smart kids.
Susan Blow.
Well,
Oh, not Blow. No, I'm thinking of the other one. Yeah,
Blow is
Bush.
for the less gifted students.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right.
No,
So
but
I met Fred in high school. Okay, we didn't go to Scruggs together, but John White did, who they're going to interview next.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, two things maybe to close this part of the interview. No one will ever convince me differently, and I guess I'm just going to live in my own fairy tale. Because now, even in the senior league, the premier pitchers, the guys you try to get who are 50, you're chasing left-hand pitching. Fred, you know as well as I do, you were a left-hand hitter, you were a switch hitter. The left-hand hitters had a bit of an advantage batting against them righties, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you know, when the left-hand guys came in with Kinney and Sabor with those good curveballs, it was tough hitting good left-hand pitching, boy. You're out there shaking hands with the first base coach with the first curveball, right? And so, you know, I'm going to go to my grave, okay, convincing myself.
do I have to go
that,
to your funeral?
Well, I hope I'll be
Oh,
around.
my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it.
Okay.
I'm going to go to my grave convinced that if I'd have been left-handed, that they'd offered me a little bit more money and my dad would let me go. And I'm not convinced that I'd ever been good enough to get to the big leagues, but I think I might have been good enough to play minor league baseball and get my name in the book, and that would have meant a lot to me. And so that's a dementia I'll live myself. And you know what I'm putting on my tombstone?
What?
My wife's not very happy about it. I recently changed my will since my mother has died and whatever, and written in the will.
Yeah.
And I have actually asked Fred, and I've asked my son, and Fred, my best friend, will make sure. And I've actually put it in the will. On my dad's tombstone, there's a nice little insignia of chiropractic, like a medical caduceus, right, next to my mother. And I will be buried here in St. Louis.
Oh, good.
I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm not from Denver, Colorado.
No, you're not.
I'm a South St. Louis boy.
Right.
And my brother-in-law, Cecil Morris, just died. And I bought a plot in Mount Hope Cemetery within a stone's throw of where my father and my mother are. And I'll be buried in Lemay, Missouri at the Mount Hope Cemetery. Where my mom and dad are buried, okay, down on Lemay, okay, and so on my tombstone there will be the following. Would you call it an epitaph, perhaps? I'm not sure what the proper term would be. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is what it's going to say, Loretta. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but my son has assured me it will be there, and so is my friend, Fred Weissman. It will say this. Here lies Terry Yochum, the man who had a silver lip, who thought he had a golden arm, who spent his whole life wishing he would have been left-handed.
Oh, no.
That's what'll go on my tombstone, Freddie. And you promised me. Inga's now agreed. I put it in my will. She thinks I'm crazy. And I'm going to have a little thing for chiropractic there, for me being a chiropractor. But nothing about book, nothing else. That's the only thing he's going to be.
What if he dies before you?
Well, then his wife's going to make sure.
Oh, okay.
And my sister promised me she'll make sure.
Okay.
She's younger than me.
Yeah.
And maybe the last thing to close, Freddie, if you asked me what's the greatest game I ever played in my life, it's almost 50 years I've been playing baseball, right? I think the greatest game, I have one memory of the greatest game of my entire life. And it was refreshed in this scrapbook that's upstairs that my mom, God bless her, she put all these stats together. It was at Heine Field, and I was 14 years old. And I was pitching for Mr. David, a team called C.J. Narrett Construction Company. And Mr. Elvin David was the manager of that team, along with Bill Ruson's father. And I pitched against the VFW team. The manager of that team was Chard. And the Chard family was very famous here in South St. Louis. And on that team was Jan Schmidt. And Jerry Lawson from Cleveland, and Johnny Mueller, an Olympic soccer player from Cleveland. And they had, Ron Bazikas played third base for that team. Carl Reinhardt played second base on that team. This team was loaded. And we had a couple of ragamuffins. You weren't on that team. I hadn't met you yet. Bill Rusin was on that team, and we had a couple ragamuffin guys from Hancock High School, and Rick David was playing center. There was nobody from Cleveland on that team except Bill Rusin and I, and the game was the state final game. Okay, it was the night before I started Cleveland High School.
Oh,
It was Labor Day. Remember Labor Day? We started the next day. So it was Monday night, Labor Day, at Heine Miney Field, that I pitched against the defending champions, the VFW team, Chard, all them guys, right? And half of them I knew, because we played Little League against each other. And Fred, it was in the seventh inning, okay? It was in the seventh inning, and that game was 2-1. We were winning 2-1, and I was pitching a no-hitter. And there was a guy on second base, and I got one more out to get. It's the top of the seventh, and a guy hit a flare. I jammed the guy, and he broke his bat. And if he catches his ball, I'm going to pitch a no-hitter. The first no-hitter of my life in the state finals. And I jammed the guy, and he breaks the bat. Mrs. Booth, I can see it as if it happened yesterday. It was a long time ago.
yeah.
And it was too far to the left and too deep for the third baseman to get it, right? This is a shortstop's ball, right? Got a great shortstop on this team. Very good shortstop. Vernon Weeda was playing shortstop. Kenny Niederstadt was playing third base. These guys were from Hancock High School. And Vernon was very fast, and he's grazing over. He's going to catch this ball, Fred. Coach Cliff, Nebo, Gover, Darling, all of these guys are there. There's a few hundred people there, okay, from Cleveland, because they're scouting guys who's coming up to play at Cleveland, right? And Freddie, he goes out to catch the ball, and the ball goes off the tip of his glove. He tripped on a divot. His spike got caught on a divot in the grass, and he stumbled. And when he stumbled, it caused him to be a foot short, and the ball went off the tip of his glove. And there's 2 outs. Fred, the guy's on second base. What's he doing? He's running, and he scored, tied the game 2-2. And I lost my no-hitter. Jan Schmidt pitched 7 innings in that game, and they brought a guy in from Bayless High School whose name was Fisher, and Fisher pitched the rest of that game up to 12 innings. And I have the stats upstairs. I've reread it. I pitched all 12 innings. I gave up 2 hits in 12 innings. I walked 2 guys in 12 innings, and I struck out 12 batters. In the bottom of the 12th, Johnny Roach was on second base. He'd gotten on the base hit and stole second. Johnny Roach was dating my sister Kay. He was dating Kay. He was our second baseman. And it was like 2 a.m. in the morning. This game started like 8:30 at night. It was under the lights, right? Because you're playing through the playoffs. Now you get to the final game, right? And it was like 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I think, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was 12 o'clock. It seemed like it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I got a base hit up the middle. Jerry Lawson was playing center field. I got a hard base hit up the middle. And Jerry come charging, man. And Johnny Roach on second base is fast. And he's got a shot to get him at the plate. And he threw the ball over the catcher's head, and we won the game. That's, in my mind, the greatest game I've ever played. I've won a couple state championships. I've won some, in the senior league, and I was on some very competitive teams, the Geiger Collegians, Southern Funeral Parlor for Doc Ryan, and I've had some other great games. But that game, to me, because I pitched it for 12 innings, I was 14 years old, and I got the base hit to win the game. And Coach Cliff saw that. Coach Cliff was there that night. And him and Nebo were all over me to come out and, try out for the team and be able to play. And it was at that time maybe I thought, well, maybe I do have some talent, That was, in my mind, the greatest memory I ever have, having played this game for 50 years.
When you started Cleveland, could you tell us the story about how you ended up on the varsity team as a freshman?
He talked himself into it.
Yes, he did.
I believe it.
Have you heard this story?
No.
This is Terry at his finest.
I can't believe you remember this, Freddie. Well, and for maybe, if there are any students that might be looking at this, if and whenever this book or DVD gets created. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but this story that Fred remembers will tell you who I am. This story will tell you the substance of my being. And this story will tell you the energy and drive that made me become a successful person in my life. So I got touted to come out for varsity. They got JV. Gover's coaching JV with Darling. Okay.
Oh yeah, Frank Darling.
Frank Darling, right? So, but no, they coaxed me to come out for the varsity, right?
Yeah.
Instead of JV, which I thought was an honor, right? Because there's no Freddie. I was the only freshman.
I know.
I was the only freshman out trying out, right? You're all freshmen play JV ball, right? So I go out and I'm trying out. Now I got public health with Coach Niebel, and he was the coach then, right? Carlton Niebel, okay?
Oh, yeah, jerk.
Yeah, he was a jerk, is what he was. He wasn't a very good coach. He was a Bible preaching Lutheran
Yeah.
zealot, is what he was. And so I got public health with him. So I'm trying out Johnny Frymuth, Dandra Danovich, Bob Matten, Terry Klein, big Bob Fraser, a lot of very good older guys on this team, right? And so I make the first couple of cuts. Oddly enough, I don't get cut right away, right? So he calls me after class. This is a story you want to hear, right?
Yes.
This is a story. He calls me after class and says, Terry, I need to talk to you. I got public health for him, right? And he's teaching public health. Yeah, he knew about public health like I could drive a spaceship, I'll tell you.
I believe it.
Yeah. He says, I need to talk to you. And he said, we're about to get down to final cuts here, right? And,
This is Nebel.
This is Nebel telling me, because he was running the varsity like that with Coach Cliff. And he was kind of in charge of stuff and all the practices and managing it. And he said, you really have done very well, Terry, but I think that, you really need to be going to the JV now. And I said, really, Coach? I mean, have I not done very well? He said, no, you performed very well, Terry. He says, but you're a good hitter. And I know you play good third base because I've seen you play third base. And you're not going to pitch here on the varsity. You're going to ride the bench. I said, but am I good enough? Did you just infer that I might be good enough to make the varsity? Did I? Well, yeah, you are good enough to make the varsity, Terry, but you're not going to play. You're going to ride the bench. I got Dan Ravanovich, I got Terry Klein, I got Johnny Frymuth, I got all these big guys. They're juniors and seniors, and you'd ride the bench. And on the JV team, you'll be the number one pitcher. You'll start at third base, and you'll play and hit every game. And I know you'll do well. You've got good athletic talent. And then as a sophomore, you'll come up, these seniors will move on, and you can contribute and help us. I said, well, really, Coach, I said, I want to play with the big guys. If you think I'm good enough to play with the big guys, I want to play with the big guys. He says, Terry, you're not listening. That's what my parents used to always say, Terry, you're not listening. I did a lot of not listening, I drove my parents about crazy, right? Because I had an endless source of energy, and it was always
You needed some
sometimes
Ritalin, maybe.
misdirected, I don't think I was attention deficit. I was just a
Hyper.
driven person, And so I said, I really want to play on the varsity team. So he's trying to talk me into JV, and I'm arguing with him. I'm 15 now, Fred. 14 when we started in the fall, 15 in the spring, right? I'm 15 years old and I'm arguing with the head baseball coach.
I don't blame you.
I'm arguing. So he says, get out of here. Go out, work out, right? So he runs me out. I go working out and whatever. And about a week or two later, now we're down to another cut coming, right? They had a cut, I didn't get cut. But we're whittling our way down to 18. And, it's like 20, 23, 24 guys left, right? Down to 22, down to 21. And he has the same conversation a couple weeks later. Terry, you need to play JV. There are no freshmen on this team. But, Coach, you said I was good enough to make this team. And I want to play with the big boys. I don't want to play in a JV. Matter of fact, Coach, I'm going to tell you right now. Here it is, Loretta. Here it comes, okay? If you place me on this JV team, I'm not going to play.
Good.
I ain't playing. But,
He was
and
a jerk
Nebo said, what do you
anyhow.
mean you ain't playing? I said, I'm just telling you, I'm not going to play. You said I was good enough to play on
Yeah.
this varsity team, and I'm going to play on the varsity team, and I want to be one of the first freshmen to ever do that, and that's it. Well, I'm going to call your dad and tell your dad, and Coach Cliff knows your dad, and Coach Cliff used to go to your dad as a patient. I said, you can make all the phone calls you want. I'm not doing it.
Good for
You hard-headed, get the hell out of here. So he run me out.
He used the word hell.
Well, maybe he
Oh.
didn't. Maybe he didn't. I don't know, Loretta. but-
Where's his religion?
Oh yeah, he used to come to the mound with a Bible.
Oh,
I
sure.
remember pitching a game against Vashon, and I'm getting ripped. I mean,
Yeah.
they're hitting bombs off me. It's like guns of Navarone. And he comes to the mound with a Bible, and here's Joey Lawson looking at me like, and he's quoting the scripture to me while he ought to be,
Oh, no.
he ought to be telling me how to pitch. It was a joke. The guy was a joke.
Oh, tell me about it.
Coach Cliff knew what he was doing. Nebel did not. I'm sorry, Mr. Nebel, if you ever see this, but I'm sorry you were not a very good coach or a motivator. Quoting Matthew 23 didn't help me when a guy just hit 3 home runs off me, right? So, so now it's down to the final cut. He has a third one. He calls my dad. And either Nebel called my dad or Coach Cliff called my dad. I can't remember. And my dad now is giving it to me. Hey, fat ass, what are you doing? You need to be playing ball, and you play for the JV, and you do what coach tells you. I said, Dad, I ain't doing it. What do you mean you ain't doing it? I ain't going to do it. I'm going to play in the varsity team, or I'm not playing at all. Hard-headed, my dad, So, I'm now down to the final cut. And Nebel is not happy with me in the public health class. I can see the looks. Are down to 20 players. They're cutting to 18. It's the last cut. And I go out to work out. We're coming in. And, our locker room we shared it with the swimmers by Doc Singer down
Yeah,
there, right? We
right.
shared it with the swimmers. And it was a small little nothingness locking room, about as small as a damn swimming pool they had
Yeah.
at Cleveland High School, which was
Right.
like nothing, right? So here I am
Start
coming in
doing
off the
that
field.
either.
And you remember, Freddie, you'd come down there and you'd walk down, they had the
Little ramp.
Yeah.
and then into the swimming pool locker
Right.
room. And I'm sitting on the steps, and one of my good friends, who lived 2 houses from me, John Frymuth, who was a stellar player, okay? He come to me.
He was 2 years older than us, wasn't he?
Yes, Johnny. So I was a sophomore, John was a senior. No, I was a freshman, John was a junior.
Right.
He was 2 years older than us. And Johnny was a stud player. Pitcher, hit, run, outfield. And I grew up with John on 4439 Dewey. And I'm sitting there, and like almost all the players are off the field and in the locker room, and I'm too scared to go in the locker room.
Oh,
Because I'm afraid that I'm going to get cut. And I'm going to have to put up or shut up, and I want to play real bad. But if I get cut, how can I go play JV ball knowing I blew my big mouth like this, right? And Loretta, when you would go in the locker room, they would have the players' names in alphabetical order. So it would start with A. Well, I was always at the end, Loretta.
yeah.
Yochum, I'm sucking the rear end all the time, right?
Yeah.
Me and John White, Johnny
Right.
White, always at the end, right? I didn't want to see it, Fred. I was scared. I figured, you know what? He's going to cut me. And I'm not going to get to play at all. And I'm going to have to eat this crow big time. And I'm sitting on the steps. I didn't want to go in the room. I did not want to go in this room. Guys are taking showers or getting dressed. I'm sitting in my uniform on the steps on the bottom of the floor, just up from the cafeteria. You know where
I
it
know
is.
exactly where
You know
you're
where
at.
it is, right?
Sure.
And Johnny Frymuth was late coming off because he'd been running wind sprints because he was pitching the next day. And Johnny says, Terry, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm just kind of thinking about it. He said, what do you mean? I says, this final cut today. They're down to 18 today, and they're cutting 2 guys. And I think there's a good chance I'm going to get cut, and I really don't want to see it. I don't want to go in there. He says, Terry, you got to go in there. I says, I know, but I don't want to go in there. Because if I get cut, it's a disaster is what this is. And he made me get up, and he walked me in, Johnny Frymuth. And he walked me in that room. And there was my name in the bottom of that list. I made that team.
Oh, my goodness.
Yochum, number 18. I made that team. I didn't get cut. And I'll tell you, it brings a tear to my eye now to tell you that story. I can't tell you what that meant to me. And that's who I am.
Did you talk to Nebel then?
Well, I thanked him actually.
Oh my.
You know,
Wow, it was nice.
I went up to him, you know, later that day after I got dressed, and he's kind of looking at me, Fred, like, you know, you kid, you taunted me, you know, and I went up to him. I said, Coach, I said, I know what this means to me. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and I'll never forget what I said to him, and I won't let you down. I will not let you down, is what I said to him. So what you hear and feel here is who I am. I'm the kind of guy that if I believe I can, I will, and I'll do it to the best of my ability, 110%. There's no neutral, there's no coast, there's no cruise control, right? Guess what, Freddie? Well, Nebel said, well, you're going to ride the bench there. I said, Coach, I understand. But you know what, Coach? I'm going to get a chance, and I ain't going to let you down. Freddie, second game of the season. We're at the Greens. It's colder than heck. It's in March, Freddie, and we're playing Lutheran South, and they're a stud team. And Johnny Frymuth is on the mound, and he takes a one-hop right in the testicles in the second inning, and he ain't got a cup on. Johnny Frymuth gets hit right in the balls on a one-hopper, and it's like 44 degrees out. They carried Johnny off the field on a stretcher and took him to the hospital. His testicles got about as big as a grapefruit. Could you imagine? Second game, Fred. Second game. Non-conference, Lutheran South, right? So Nebel, looking around, I'm sitting at the end of the bench. Yochum, get your glove, get on the mound. Now, Fred, how intimidating would it be to go from the bench to warm up on the mound, Fred? Not in the bullpen in front of the defending champs there for their league, Lutheran South. I got to go to the mound and warm up on the mound. Not in the bullpen, right in the middle of the field. Now, you talk about intimidating. I go out there, it's colder than hell. You have all the time you want to warm up. Oh yeah, all the time. Hell, I want to get out of here, man. This is scary, man. And so you know what it was? It was Nebel saying, "Okay, son,
Show me.
you're so good, huh? Here's the ball. Let's see what you can do, big mouth." Right? I mean, that's what he was inferring. Come on, son. You want to pitch? Come on. I didn't want to. Those guys were studs. I'd rather have pitched against, you know, one of the weaker teams right out of the chute, right?
Yep.
But you know what? It was a challenge. And he was going to give me that opportunity. And you know what? As Robin Williams said in the movie, you know, carpe diem, seize the moment, man. I went to the mound. Freddie, I don't know how I did it. I was able to just kind of put everything else out of my mind. My mom and dad weren't there. Nobody was there, right? I'm not going to play. Probably be on the bench the whole damn year, right? And the game was 0-0 at that time. And I beat those guys 4-1.
Oh my gosh.
I beat Lutheran South 4-1 as a freshman, and I lettered all 4 years. And finished my career 13 wins, 4 losses at Cleveland. And it just meant the world to me. So that story, really, Fred, is kind of a reflection of who I am as a person. Because all I took was my drive to want to be a successful person. That's kind of what this book, I think, should be about. How an average guy from South St. Louis, who had nothing but average ability, but believed in himself and had potential, but never realized it, and took that. You know, I didn't stop pitching, Freddie. I just started pitching chiropractic or radiology. I became successful because I believed I could. It was never more important, Loretta, that I would be better than Fred Weissman, my best friend. It was never more important that I be better than Johnny Frymuth. It was important that I was the best I could be.
Yeah, he didn't have any relative named Lou Frymuth, did he?
No.
Okay.
Earl and Judy Frymuth, you taught them all. Barbara Frymuth. Barbara Frymuth was one of your best students. She became a math teacher. Won some honors. So, you know, it was always about being the best I could be, not better than somebody else. And honestly, if I went to the mound and I hadn't prepared myself and I hadn't done the right wind sprints and hadn't worked out and whatever, and I'm playing Southwest Longhorns, I'm playing Stockholm Legion Post or Gardensville Afton Legion Post, and those guys knock me around, tell you what, I'd be real disappointed in myself. But if I got beat that day, by a better team on that day, on that moment, and I was prepared and I had done my homework, then I tip my hat to you and I work a little harder the next time. And the next time, if possible, I'm going to get you. And I got a lot more of them than got me. You know that. We played enough ball together. You know, Loretta, I can't thank you enough for doing this interview.
You can thank her.
Well, I thank your daughter Pat for allowing this to all happen.
Well, I said, I don't think I should do this because I just got out of the hospital and everything. I'm a mess. And
Well,
she talked me into it.
You did
did a
very
great
well.
job.
You did a great job.
So God bless you, Loretta. I love you.
Well, thank
You're the
you.
best teacher I ever had, and the best looking one I ever had for sure.
Well, you were asked to be here because of some unique experiences and unique insights.
With him.
Yeah, and no one else could have relayed the stories you did and from the perspective you did because you were there, and you know it was
Yeah.
firsthand for you.
I enjoyed the whole thing.
Signing off here. God bless you, huh?
God
Here,
bless
give me a
you
kiss.
too.
Give me a kiss. Come on. You're our
Gosh.
favorite teacher. And let's get some still pictures, huh? And I'd like to have a picture. I'd like to have a picture with Fred and Mrs. Booth, and I want a picture with Pat, and I want